tradition in the ninth house, it wants to feed them spiritually. It wants to feed their aspirations. It wants to inspire their work and connect it with spiritual values and with meaning. But it's also only 4.5 degrees off the midheaven. So this also has to do with professional dignity, which would be a 10th house or midheaven concern, and with public standing. And I will try and get around to mentioning these points in talking about theory, because the ancient Greek theory was also had to do with being professionally commissioned to go on an official journey, and they were being a diplomat. So you stand for something. So to me, the ninth house seems to me the most obvious house to which theory would refer. It has to do with the guiding principles of the discipline. Jupiter in that house gives us the mental perspective to see our daily work or study, which would be the 3rd house and the 6th house concerns, in the framework of the big picture. If anybody gets confused, just wait a minute, there's a technical point. Don't be embarrassed to stop, because I'm assuming that people here are going to be at every level. I'm not assuming that everybody's an expert. So the ninth has to do with long journeys, whether they be spiritual, mental, or physical. But the journey has to begin and end at a particular place. This place, I imagine, is the house of theory. It's a good thing to have a home base to shelter your knowledge. Here, Capricorn rules the 4th house, the home base. It's a Capricorn house, and Saturn is the ruler. Again, suggesting the importance of the tradition and the ancestors. If you are Jean Lall, you also have to have a place to store your library. You have to have, there's serious weight here at the 4th house. And Pluto, at that point, for me, it speaks about how much money it would cost me. It must have cost me all these years to buy all these books, not to mention store them. Pluto in Capricorn at a social level is making us aware of inherited wealth, plutocracy, entrenched power structures, but also the potential for transforming those structures. Pluto can sit on the riches, but Pluto also can liberate and transform. Everything that we need is in the earth, and it's in the unconscious. Psychologically, everything we need is in our unconscious. We just have to know how to reach it. And we have to figure out how to negotiate with the gods of the underworld to release it. This involves having a relationship to the earth and to Pluto. Does everyone know the mythology of Pluto and or Hades in the underworld? The god of the underworld. So we have to sacrifice something. We might have to sacrifice some professional status, or some money, or some convenience, or something that our ego is attached to, in order to find psychologically what would renew us, and in terms of the earth, how we could find some other way of getting around besides just being completely petroleum dependent. How could we manage to have electricity without strip mining the mountains?
Well, you're talking about Pluto, if I might just add one comment. I don't like the way Pluto and Saturn and Mars are described as wicked and bad. I think that, and Venus is all good. I think that's nonsense. Look at Adolf Hitler's chart. Venus is all over the place. Venus is about attraction, ultimately, and ugliness can attract. Adolf Hitler perverted and distorted his Venusian gifts, and became a real monster. I think he's a testament. And if you take a look at it, the fact of the matter is that almost all of the leaders of genocides, I've actually looked into this, are either Libra or Taurus. The Venus influence signs, and Bin Laden had Venus in Pisces on his midheaven, by the way. So I think that if you need any good examples of the fact that no planet, every planet can be used for good or bad.
Right.
And it's about conscious free will, and I don't believe that Pluto puts cancer cells in the body or kills people.
Yeah.
If anything, Pluto shows up to help us deal with those things when it happens, but it doesn't necessarily mean that, I don't like the idea of visualizing the planets as tyrants in respect. And I think that too much negative things have been said about some of them. And I find it interesting that usually we celebrate the resurrection of Christ, and at least always the Passion of Christ in the sign of Aries, which is supposed to be a war sign. Jesus wasn't about that.
Right.
So I think that it's, a lot of correction is needed.
Right. And Pluto is really the god who initiates the soul in the underworld. And the potential for rebirth. If you think of Capricorn as the infrastructure and the power structures, Pluto is a planet who could actually transform the system in that way. So here Pluto, and Pluto is, again, just off the angle, so it's in the third house, as well as affecting the IC and the sense of home and roots. And so it speaks about the deep structures of the mind, what Jung called the archetypes, which can help us in our astrological. I mean, we couldn't do astrology without these archetypes, which are the deep structures of the mind, of the imagination. And it's also about the regenerative potential found in traditional cultural forms, including the archaic ones, religion, art, and so forth. Some of the things we're going to talk about tonight. Astrology is in our unconscious, and it's also in our historical tradition. It has been part of our science, our religion, and our art, and every other cultural form. And as C.G. Jung said, it was the psychology of the ancient world. So another way we could look at this Capricorn rulership here is to think in terms of history as a support for everything that we're doing. And so one of my habits as a theorist is to hang out with historians and read a lot of history. Last summer I saw, does everyone know Nick Campion's history books on astrology? I saw him last summer at the conference in New York, the INSAP conference, and asked him what was he working on these days, and he got this little guilty look on his face. He said, well, I have to confess, it's always about history. I just have this thing, it's like a disease. And I said, oh, you don't have to apologize to me, because I have the same addiction. I love history. I have a lust for history. So I go over to Johns Hopkins and attend lectures on history of science, technology, and medicine. They have a wonderful colloquium. And over the years, they have had amazing papers about the history of astrology. Just in the last 3 or 4 years, it's finally possible again to say, oh, let me tell you about Kepler's astrology. Galileo's horoscopes. Even Copernicus's.
They drew horoscopes?
They did. And Copernicus left no writings on astrology, but by deduction, Robert Westman, a great scholar who's just published this massive book on the Copernican period, the Copernican Revolution, has demonstrated just from all the documentary evidence about where Copernicus was, who he worked for, and what everyone else was doing, that Copernicus had to have been doing horoscopes. So you're beginning to see a recognition of what was repressed, which is that astrology was so much a part, not only of previous history, but of the period of the scientific revolution. So they're beginning to look at that objectively again. So I just go and indulge my weakness for history. And so I just want to encourage you all to find out, where is your guilty pleasure? Where is your intellectual chocolate? And encourage you to go there, just shamelessly. For me, it's history, because I get so much help from tracing where things came from, and all the changes they went through, and how astrology was related to this and this and this and this at a particular time, and why did it change? Because that feeds my understanding of where things. It's like I can see how it's moving now. I can see the next dance move when I see where it's going on before. just as in therapy, we understand more when we see, oh, this thing I'm in the middle of right now, I see where that happened in my childhood. Where are the roots of that in my childhood? It might be a problem or a blockage, or it might be a gift that got started in childhood, and it helps so much to see the history of it. So the same thing applies in cultural history. Thus my joy in attending a very, very specialized lectures. And I don't worry if a lot of the material is beyond my technical range. And I don't try to master or remember everything I hear. I listen to it like good music and let it inform my mind at the level of structure and build up my sense of where things came from, and also my appreciation of image. It's like going to the museum and you absorb the pictures, and you can't tell somebody a month later who painted that, but the image has stayed with you. And it helps a lot also not to just pay attention to the content of a talk, but also to watch and be affected by the way the person's mind works, and the way they articulate a question, and how they work with the material. It's like going to a master class if you're a musician. You see how somebody else attacked that particular piece. So as we go along tonight, I hope you will do something similar, and not worry that you have to grasp every point or commit it to memory, but just sort of climb on my little bus and ride along, and look at the scenery, and hum along to the music, and see if it opens up something for you. And ask questions if